I always record everything I say in public, because Pauline and I tend to be targets, in case you haven't noticed. And I never have to adjust these up. Never. Ralph will have to after me. So I prepared only literally 3 minutes of comment, because I'm more interested in being here for question and answer and also to be taking part in the forum. So I'll start with my prepared comments. I received a phone call yesterday from my staff saying, "Good news, Malcolm, the Caloundra High School has agreed not to run any more drag queen shows for their kids." So well done, congratulations, that was fantastic. Never in my life would I have expected to hear those words, a government school agreeing not to run drag queen shows. What the hell happened to parental rights? Looks like they're bowing down to parental rights. But who the hell do they think they are? It's not the job of a teacher to run a drag queen show for kids. I mean, I can't stop laughing. It's deadly serious, but it's crazy. It's not the job of a teacher to run a drag queen show for kids. These people are sick. They're sick. Drag queen shows are adult entertainment. There is no artistic merit in these shows for children. This is not art. It used to be satire. The artists used to make fun of public figures. Now they're making fun of us. Not me, us. The perversion agenda is real, and we're happy to talk about that in the forum part. And it has a very specific purpose, and I want you to listen to this closely because it's part of a bigger agenda, which I'm happy to talk about later. That bigger specific purpose is to destroy the sacred institution of the family. The family is under threat, and it has been for 50 years in this country since they brought in the horrific Family Law Act, which came from the United Nations through the Labor government of 1975, Lionel Murphy as Attorney General under Gough Whitlam as Prime Minister. And it's the slaughterhouse of the nation. So the family and community are in the way of these perverts shaping Australia in their own image. They're wanting to shape the country. And it's a very ugly image. It's an image that has no place for parental rights. Gone are parental rights. Schools will decide what children see and do, and at what age, not parents. And the age, as I'll explain in a minute, is really frightening. Schools will deliberately expose children to sexual contact at earlier and earlier ages in a way that grooms them for early sexual activity, away from the family. Your school library right now will have copies of graphic novels full of sex and violence that can be accessed by children who are age 10 and above. Books like Welcome to Sex, who's heard of it? That is, in fact, a how-to manual replete with illustrations for sexual practices most adults would refuse to do. Manual written for children 10 and up, children like yours. But it gets worse. The World Health Organization has produced a sex education guidelines that starts children on sex education at birth. Birth. By 6, the World Health Organization wants children taught sexual acts. 6. By 9, they assume children will be sexually active. 9. I've seen it. I've seen the guidelines. This is real. If you think this was just a few pervert teachers, then think again. This is an agenda brought to you by global predatory billionaires. Add the word parasitic. And their enforcement mechanism is the United Nations and the United Nations World Health Organization. I'm sure everyone's heard of them. You fought a great fight, and congratulations to you. It's not over, though. These perverts will just lay low and try again in a few years. They're working their way systematically through the state government. They're entrenched in the state government, in the federal government as well. Not just Labor Party, also the Liberal Party, because it's the bureaucrats who run the show. They will not stop until we stop them. That's the only thing that will stop them, us stopping them. And I'm happy to talk about the bigger picture in terms of not just the globalization, but also how we as adults, as voters in this country, have let our country slide. Make no mistake, the people in this room are responsible for the destruction of our country. That includes me. I was asleep until about 2008. They will not stop until we stop them, and we can stop them. I've got a few examples of how we have stopped them. It's time for everyday Australians to take back your government. It's actually our government. I'm not in government. I'm in Parliament representing you, but we need to take back our government. We need to withdraw from the UN and its agencies. In 2016, in my first speech in the Senate in September 2016, I called for Auxexit, the term I gave at the time of Brexit for Australia getting out of the United Nations, and I've been calling for it since. At every election, chuck every politician out that encouraged or turned a blind eye to this perverted agenda. And that's quite a few of them. That's the majority of them. I will continue by reading from the transcript of my question in Senate estimates last week. We have fun at Senate estimates. So I asked a question of I've forgotten his name, Mr. Carvalho, Mr. Carvalho, who was in charge of the national curriculum. And previous Senate estimates, I asked him a question. I asked the ABC, a question. Why do you have Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu devoted to one page on your whole website on the ABC? Because, Senator Roberts, it's in the national curriculum. So we fronted up a couple of days later to the national curriculum and said, do you have Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu on your website? No, Senator. On your curriculum? No, Senator. So the ABC lied. So we held them accountable. Some of you didn't even flinch. The ABC lied, which is pretty normal. So this time I just thought, I'm coming up to Caloundra, so let's ask a few questions. So I started with Mr. Carvalho, who's in charge of the national curriculum. He's just left, by the way. And he's given me good answers. If more of the bureaucrats were like him, we'd be better off. I'm not a fan of the national curriculum, by the way, because it's an instrument for globalisation. But I don't think that Mr. Carvalho is aware of that. A lot of the bureaucrats are not. So this is me talking. Thank you for being here. We have a number of constituents, quite a few, who are very concerned about the story I'm going to tell you about. Can you please advise me which part, if any, because the ABC got it wrong last time, of the Australian curriculum relates to drag queen story time? Right. Thank you. So he basically indicated with his eyes and his mouth that it was ridiculous. Not the question, but that it was not in the curriculum. So I said, we have schools that are hosting drag queen story times where they're getting drag queens in to read stories to children. It's happening on the Sunshine Coast and in other parts of Queensland. It's done on school time, so we thought that surely it has to relate to the curriculum for them to do that. That's why I'm asking in that section. So then I went straight on to my second question. My second question, because you've denied it, which I thought would be correct, is what control or influence does the national curriculum have on state schools? So Mr. Carvalho said, I'm not sure I denied your question. So I pointed out, I was waiting, so he said, I was waiting for the full extent of it. So I pointed out to him, you indicated quite clearly that it doesn't exist in the curriculum, just with his eyes and his mouth. Mr. Carvalho said, I indicated, I guess, that I was trying to process the question with a view to giving you a sensible answer. I may ask Ms. Foster to contribute there. What was the second part of your question? So I said, what influence does the national curriculum have over state schools? This is where it gets interesting for you and for me. Compulsion to follow the national curriculum. What are the responsibilities? Mr. Carvalho said, there is an agreement that states and territories will implement the Australian curriculum, but each of them does that in a slightly different way. The terminology that we use in relation to this is that states and territories are free to adopt and adapt the curriculum to suit their local circumstances. That's the national curriculum. That is the agreement, and different states and territories are in different parts of the plan to implement the Australian curriculum. They're going through and looking at it and determining to what extent they can adopt it fully. Some states' curriculums are very close to the Australian curriculum, and other states adapt it widely before implementing it. So I said to him, is it done on a state-by-state basis, or are individual schools free to go wherever they want? Mr. Carvalho said, we have three sectors in the country. Jurisdictions, certainly in the state school systems, tend to take a uniform approach for their jurisdiction. Different jurisdictions are across the state in state schools. Different jurisdictions have different mechanisms for adopting and adapting their curriculum. For example, in Victoria, there is the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority. In Queensland, you have the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority. Remember that. State government. And New South Wales has the New South Wales State Education Standards Authority. These are the bodies in those major jurisdictions which have a close look at the Australian curriculum and then determine how, if at all, it should be adapted to those jurisdictions. Western Australia have their school curriculum standards authority, and they also undertake that adaptation approach. The other jurisdictions tend to be closer. Queensland is closer, as are Tasmania, South Australia and Northern Territory in terms of their implementation. So I finish by thanking him. Our political system, our government system is adapted as a combination of the American system and the Westminster system from Britain. What the Americans did very clearly in their constitution was set up a small central government, the federal government, with the states doing most of the actual service providing. And they wanted the states to do minimal service providing, and most of it to be done by private enterprise. The Americans went further and actually set up the school districts in the hands of the local government. So that's what they've done over there. Now we copied that. And the reason why the Americans set up a very small central government is when they were developing their constitution, they looked at Europe and said, we don't want that. And what is that? That is big central government controlling the people and owned by big central banks, privately owned central banks. The Bank of England was formed in 1694, private bank. There's a history of the Federal Reserve Bank, its predecessors, privately owned banks. Current US Federal Reserve, privately owned bank. They didn't want that. Their constitution has been twisted and distorted. Now we set up the same thing. Minimal central government, maximum power at the states, but the majority to be run by the people. Education is a state responsibility. What the hell have we got with the Federal Department of Education? Think about that. The Federal Department of Education runs not one school and has 4,000 bureaucrats. Who's paying for them? What do? They make it easy to bring in global approaches to the national curriculum. Then the national curriculum gets funneled to the state. That's what their purpose is, to undermine you with the globalist agenda. Health, state, again. What are we doing with the Federal Health Department? How many thousands of bureaucrats? States are responsible for the health system. The environment, state responsibility. It wasn't spelled out back in 1901, but it clearly is a state responsibility. More and more power is going to the federal government. That's the problem. But the way you manage it is through the state. And so hold the state government in this state accountable for what's happening in your school. But what I'm trying to show you is that it's our responsibility as parents, as adults in this state to hold the Queensland Labor government accountable, boot them out at the next election, and vote for independents and minor parties, because the Liberals are pretty much the same as the Labor Party now, sadly. That's the first point. The second point is let your federal member know that they're not doing the right thing with this national curriculum. We need to get our country back. So I'll go into more detail because I love question and answer. I'll be happy to answer any question. And I also came here on the basis that it was a forum, not a presentation by me. So just in case we had some comments made. But I'd love to hear what your views are about this and how you've tackled it. I know Abby, can you stand up for a minute, please, Abby? Abby has done a phenomenal job running a community series every, couple of weeks? Every couple of weeks, international guests, sometimes live. I've spoken there. It's a wonderful turn. So this is the kind of thing we need to restore our country. Parents and adult citizens invested in actually participating in politics and holding people accountable. Because we have let this country go, we need to get it back again. And I'm happy to talk more about that with Q&A in terms of what our responsibilities are as adults and as voters in this country. Because we are in charge officially, and we have not been living as though we're in charge. So thank you very much for standing up. Thank you very much for winning. Buckle up for the long haul, because there's a long way to go to get our country back. But thank you so much for what you're doing.
All right. Now, do I need to raise this, or can you hear me? I don't know. How is it? Is it all right? You're all good. It's all good. Now, it's a pleasure to be here today, obviously. So thank you, everyone, for having me. Now, I want to start by saying this. Ladies and gents, I'll start by saying this. I stand firmly, very, very firmly with all of you here today, and I'll be doing absolutely everything that I can in federal parliament everywhere that I go, on social media, in the street, wherever I am, everyone that will talk to me, to preserve the innocence of our nation's children. Our nation's vulnerable. This issue is obviously close to my heart, as I'm sure you've all seen, and I'm sure it's obviously close to your heart as well. That's why you're here. Now, I believe in the fundamental right of a parent to raise their children free from this, free from the indoctrination and the influence of the state and woke extremism. I believe in just allowing children just to be children. That's it. Allow them to be children. Now, the state has no place in intervening in the role of a parent, and they certainly have no right to indoctrinate and confuse our nation's youth. There is perhaps no greater trust than this. No greater trust than we give to the schools when we give them the responsibility for the most precious part of our lives. Now, it used to be this. It used to be the case that when you dropped your child at school, you knew exactly what your child was going to be taught. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Am I right or am I wrong? Is that how it used to be? Yes or no? Yeah. Yes, that's how it used to be. Those days are gone. They're gone. Unfortunately, of course, they're gone. Long gone. Long gone. These days, what's it like these days? These days, your child is more likely to graduate barely passing with their English and their writing skills. Barely passing. And just enough math to work out how much change they get from $2 when they purchase something worth $1. That's what's going on today. It's terrible, but don't worry though. Oh, don't worry, parents. Don't worry about basic maths. What do you need basic maths for? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about English. Don't worry about that. You don't need that. Because your kids, what's going to happen? They're going to come home with all the knowledge they need about gender theory. Who needs maths when you got gender theory? They'll know about all the 76 or whatever it is, 100 or whatever it is, genders though. They'll know that. They'll know how gender is fluid and how it can change every single day. They'll know that. What do they need maths for? Perhaps they'll learn sex education. Perhaps that instead. Not the biology of the thing, like you may have learnt when you were in school, but how to perform adult sex acts. It's nuts. Just leave the kids alone. How about that? Leave the kids alone. Thank you, sir. We got one concerned parent. Thank you, sir. Now look, the transformation of public schools into progressive indoctrination centres is now far more advanced than I even could have ever imagined. Nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing surprises me. Like you, just like you, I'm horrified. I'm horrified that publicly funded schools would hold drag shows for kids. Drag shows for kids. And I'm outraged that they do it without parental permission. Now, it's ironic. It's ironic. Schools are desperate to teach children about consent, while they deliberately ignore parental consent. They ignore it. Education is supposed to be a partnership between home and school. Home and school. And may I say this, in that relationship between home and school, the school is secondary to the home. So the home comes first. Too often, there's not only a lack of transparency about what children are being exposed to when they go to school, there is in fact deliberate secrecy. Secrecy. Now, any attempt to cut a parent out of their own children's education is obviously wrong. It's obviously wrong. Now, children do not belong to the state. I'll keep saying it. Children are the responsibility of their parents, and a school that violates that sacred responsibility has, in my view, committed a very grave sin. A grave sin, that's what they've done. Now, you think you've got it bad here in Queensland. Let me tell you about Victoria. In Victoria, we even have teachers being directed to keep a child's gender transition secret from their parents. Right now in Victoria, it's madness. Now here at your school, you've had a biological man dressed as a caricature of a highly sexualized woman performing for your kids without your knowledge, let alone your consent. It's wrong, and that is obvious. It's obviously wrong. Why do children need to see drag queens? Why? More importantly, ask yourself this next question. Why are these men, dressed in ladyface, so keen to have an audience with impressionable children? That's a better question. Why can't they go and perform at the local TAB? How about the old folks' home? How about that? Why children? Why children? It's a good question, isn't it? It's a good question. Now, whether you think that drag queens are appropriate for kids or not, it is most definitely not appropriate to keep parents in the dark about such contentious issues. Parents have a right to know what their children are being taught, but more than that, it just makes sense that parents should always be brought into the decision-making process. Always. Now, schools, they should actively seek ways of involving parents in curriculum decisions. They should take the initiative to seek parental input and hear parental concerns. Am I crazy or what? It's common sense, right? It's common sense. That sort of approach, it not only creates trust, obviously, but it creates a better learning environment. That's what it does, where the needs and the perspectives of all the stakeholders can be considered, because transparency, it builds trust. That's what it does. Speaking of stakeholders, the stakeholders, when it comes to children's education, the parents are obviously the key stakeholder. That goes without saying. They are the most important people in that equation. And any school at all that treats them as less than that is doing a disservice not only to the student, but to the parent and also to the community as well. Now, parents, obviously, I'll always stand with you in this fight against this woke agenda, this Marxist agenda. And you know what? Unfortunately, we live in a world that, in my opinion, and I'm thinking in your opinion as well, wants nothing less than to destroy children as quickly as possible, as Senator Roberts pointed out, with ever younger and younger ages, introducing them to adult concepts. Now, we've got to stand firm in defence of parental rights and the rights of children to maintain their innocence for as long as they can, because it's being attacked from all angles right now. Now, a few weeks ago in Canberra, myself, Senator Malcolm Roberts, Senator Alex Antic, and Senator Matt Canavan, we were proud to stand together in solidarity in co-sponsoring a bill called this, the Childhood Gender Transition Prohibition Bill 2023. Yep. It seeks to do exactly what the title says. It's a simple bill. So it seeks to restrict sex change medication and surgery for minors. Now, it's straightforward. It's just shocking that we even have to advocate for something like this at all. But here we are in 2023, where the woke agenda has run its way through all of our institutions like a virus infecting a host, like that. Well, ladies and gents, I'm going to tell you this. You are the cure to that virus. All of you in this room. All of you. No longer will we stand by while those who seek to destroy Western society are left to spread their sickness onto the world. Now, a child under 18 can't get a tattoo, can they? No, they can't. They can't drive a car. They can't order a beer at the pub. Can they? Can they in Queensland or not? Can they order a beer? No, they can't order a beer at the pub. They can't. Can they buy a packet of cigarettes? No, they can't buy a packet of cigarettes. And yet here we are. They are telling us that this child is allowed to undergo radical medical treatment that can result in sterilisation and permanent dysfunction, not to mention bodily disfigurement. Now you have to ask, why is it? Why is it that there are those in society who are so careful about our young people when it comes to buying a beer, but yet so cavalier when it comes to cutting off their body parts? Yeah? 1 minute they're saying this. Oh, you can't let that girl get a butterfly tattoo on her wrist. She might grow up one day and she might regret it. Okay, fair enough. But then in the next breath, they say, oh, she wants to remove her perfectly healthy breast to look more like a boy? No problem. How soon can we get this kid under the knife? It's not right. It's not right. Now, no normal, sane, rational person thinks this is normal or sane or rational. No one. Now, the number of children being treated in gender clinics has exploded over the past decade. Likewise, the number of children being prescribed puberty blockers has risen sharply. Sharply. Now, this should concern us all. It should not excite us like it does to some in our community. This should give us reason to pause. We wouldn't give a child a cigarette. You wouldn't do that. So why would you give a child a double mastectomy and remove her perfectly healthy breasts? It's madness. It's madness. If an adult, okay, if an adult, a grown man or a grown woman wants to change their outwardly appearance and pretend that they're the opposite sex, fine. Fine. Each to their own. When you reach adulthood, you can do whatever the heck you want. But once again, leave the kids alone. Are you with me? Yes. Yes. Now, politically, this fight will continue. We have a shared responsibility to protect children, all of us here. We do. It's a community responsibility. Now, we must stand firm and protect those who cannot protect themselves from these woke activists. We must protect them from an ever-expanding ideology that has zero basis in biology, in science, or in medicine. This is a woke mind virus. That's what it is. A woke mind virus. And once again, we are the cure. We are the cure. Thank you. Thank you. Now, thank you for hosting me tonight. I appreciate it. I'm always happy to speak. If anyone's watching this broadcast and wants me to speak, I'll go wherever. You just give me the call, I'll show up. Now, keep up the fight. Keep it up. Let's protect our nation's most vulnerable and preserve the inalienable rights of parents to raise their children without the meddling of the state. Now, remember this and hear me well. Hear me well once you leave this place tonight. The issues that we are experiencing were created by men and women. And as such, by men and women. The issues that were created, that we're living through right now, were created by men and women. What does that mean? It means, thank you, sir. It means men and women can fix it. Now, we must work together. We must work together for the benefit of our country and our people. Now, the challenges that we face, they're many. That's obvious. But we can do something about it. We can do something about it. You're, in fact, doing something about it right now. How? How? By taking a greater interest in the political process. By ensuring that people like me were elected to Parliament to represent you. You are doing something about it every time you volunteer your time to keep Australia sane. But remember this, alone we're weak. We are. Alone we're weak. But together, ladies and gents, together we can make a difference. Together we can make a better tomorrow. Together we can stand up. Together we can create change. And yes, together we can protect and defend our nation's children. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you. God bless our nation. Thank you.
All right. Hopefully that works. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to share a story from that has shaped me profoundly and why it's relevant to the fight against predatory content. When I was just 6 or 7 years old, I spent a month at my grandmother's close friend's house. To a young child, he seemed like the kindest man in the world. He was always gentle and never threatening. Yet behind his exterior, Michael harboured dark intentions. One day he handed me a special comic book, urging me to keep it a secret. As an innocent child, I had no grasp of what the explicit content meant, but this comic was the first step in a grooming process that continued for over a month. Michael increasingly crossed boundaries until eventually attempting to help me wash while teaching me how to clean my private parts. Thankfully, I managed to escape this situation when it was time for me to return home. Little did I know that there would be another predator in my life when I turned 13. This time, it would be a woman who would groom me. She posed as my girlfriend, and at 20 years old, she made me believe I was dating someone cool, an adult. The truth is much, much darker. This woman exploited my vulnerability and manipulated me in ways that have scarred me for life. Fast forward to today, and we now see far worse books and comics easily accessible in our school libraries. The first time I saw content as filthy as what I was groomed with as a child, it came from these learning environments, and I was devastated. The material is eerily reminiscent of what this rock spider introduced me to when I was a child younger, and it brought tears to my eyes. As someone who's experienced firsthand the manipulation these predators use through these mediums, we can't afford to just turn a blind eye. It's essential we recognise these materials as the grooming tools that they are, and we take immediate actions to eradicate them from our schools completely. Let us protect our future generations by ensuring their safety and purity in their learning environments. Let's take a stand against the normalisation of this type of content and safeguard our children from the clutches of those who would harm them. The importance of consent cannot be overstated. This gathering tonight was sparked by an exclusive report that we made at PMA News and Rural Rebel. Sadly, going on the feedback that we received after this report, many parents found that that was what it turned out, had alerted them to what was actually going on in the school. The reaction was immediate, and let's just say quite a bit passionate, with many, many parents expressing their understandable frustrations and angers. Some chose not to believe what we had reported, while others said we were extremely dangerous and we needed to be shut down. As soon as we knew we could legally do so, we aired the video that was uploaded by the entertainer from this year's event from before. Pretty much that shut things down immediately. Then the frustrations turned to not what we'd call elation, but we'll just say people were absolutely infuriated but still wanted to actually end it themselves and find out what they could do to make that happen. We've come together today not to criticise or take aim at any one person or any one school, because it's happening all over the nation. It's not just in the schools here in your area. We're here to share our concerns for what is an alarmingly big problem, and the importance of not just parental consent, but parental involvement and its vital role in a child's development is something that cannot be understated. It's essential that we emphasise how crucial it is for schools to involve parents in decision making when it comes to organising events or displaying content that may be potentially able to affect our children's values or beliefs. Schools must take religious and cultural beliefs into a higher regard, as the rights of those people are ignored every time an event like this takes place. The one good thing that we can say we all got from this is the fact that the issue transcended political boundaries. This is a unifying moment that in itself genuinely speaks volumes about the significance of taking up this fight. Senator Roberts and Senator Babet, two men from different parties, have come together to make a stand on this issue, as they know and understand the moral decency that is required in guiding our youth. This is a moral decency that's being wiped out today at the hands of the left to appease their buddies in the WEF. The collaboration of these two senators isn't just about party politics. It's about prioritising what truly matters. And for the children's sake, if we can only find one thing that we can come to middle ground on as a nation, please let it be our children's well-being. As concerned adults and parents, we must unite together when we see something isn't right, And a task as big as this takes more than just a few journalists and a couple of senators. It's going to take all of us watching our kids, watching our schools, talking with our kids and raising our concerns together so that we aren't just ignored. So we ask you to stand for a cause that aims to protect the innocence of our children from undue sexualisation via adult-style shows like the one that your schools have just had, or via the disgusting books that they now think that they can have in our libraries. One person is easy to ignore, but many with a firm, loud voice will be heard. It's really as simple as that. The overwhelming response from enraged parents from all political spectrums and walks of life has shown there is a shared desire and a firm belief that protecting and preserving our children's innocence should be at the forefront of our schools' obligations during our children's time there. This is not an issue of political alignment, nor is it simply a differing perspective. It's about doing what we feel and know in our hearts is right. Therefore, we urge you to join the Children's Defence Coalition, whose sole purpose will be to ensure that our actions are not just taken and later forgotten. Because just like the Senator said, if we just try and make these changes now, as soon as we turn our backs, they're going to implement every single thing that they've done behind our backs, and it's going to be just as bad, if not worse. Because out of spite, once we remove all of these actions from these schools, they're going to try and come back twice as hard. So we really do need to monitor them, otherwise it's going to be a waste of time. Right now, Caloundra High School has been stopped dead in their tracks. There is no more drag queens going to go back there to that school next year.
Yeah.
The only way that we can prevent it from happening at the next school is to hold them to account for what they've done and set an example of that school, which a lot of people will probably think is, being a little bit biased or picking on one place, but it's not. People will see what we've done here tonight, and from this event, they're not going to want to be part of the next one themselves. Now, already we've got a teacher from Maroochydore High School. She's told us that she has to remain anonymous. She's not game to reveal her identity because she's going to lose a job immediately when she does. But she said, look, this school is almost a clone of that school. She said, what you've talked about there and the behaviours that are taking place in that school, they're taking place in our school, and there's nothing I can do about it to stop it. She said, every time a teacher gets sacked from here or leaves, I burst into tears because I know the teacher that's going to replace them is going to be worse. She said, if I speak out, these children are going to have no one here left to protect them. So she has to go, and it's like this. She's one parent away from someone saying, oh, why aren't you teaching this inclusivity stuff in your classes, and why isn't the flag in your classes, from getting a sack? Because she gets all of this woke garbage handed to her, but she doesn't put it into a classroom. So, ladies and gentlemen, the coalition is going to be the most valuable tool at the end of all of this, because once we have the schools listening, and once we take control at the P&C meetings, and they know that we're not going to just let them fill in the time with let's talk about the coffee machine and let's talk about every other thing on the agenda that takes up all of that time, they're going to know parents are there for one reason, and it's to keep that school moral and to have respect and safety returned that we had when we went to school, that they don't have there in their schools right now. I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to bring up Lisa. Lisa is a student, or was a student at Caloundra State High School, so she knows firsthand exactly what has happened at that school through her children who are students there now. But she can also tell you how far downhill that school has gone since she was there, because she believes that it was a moral teaching ground when she was a student of that school. So if you'd like.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. And I just wanted to say straight up, the most important thing in the world to me is being a mother to my young children. I attended Caloundra High 20 years ago. Like a lot of teenagers, I had big dreams, 1,000 goals, and a desperate need for validation. I was excited for life, and I couldn't wait to grow up fast. Sadly, many young teens and their need to feel valued is a target angle for predators. Predators prey on the vulnerability of unsuspecting victims. They softly groom, coerce, and condition their target to be easily manipulated into believing that inappropriate behaviour is normal. They use tactics such as guilt as a weapon against young, impressionable minds to silence them. The psychological impact that grooming has on one's perception of healthy boundaries is almost irreparable. Awareness of what is acceptable and appropriate is disrupted and replaced with confusion and lack of discernment. I can personally testify to the long-term damage of predatory behaviour and sexual assault as a young teenager. The students today who are being blatantly exposed to inappropriate adult entertainment on school grounds across Australia and overseas are seeing that their teachers and principals are not only okay with this, but some are also encouraging it. This level of overexposure is exploiting the innocence of our youth and interfering with their pure minds. I had the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Walt Heyer from the US. Walt is an American author and activist, and he has appeared as a guest on the Candace Owens Show, as well as many other good podcasts. Walt travels around sharing his story with the world. He was interfered with as a young boy when his grandmother would secretly dress him up in a dress and praise him for how pretty he looked. He was also molested by someone else close to him, inevitably leading to severe dysphoria, hence falling into the lifestyle of gender transitioning. He lived as a transsexual for 8 years of his life before waking up to the lies and root cause of this dysphoria he was experiencing. Walt is a brave gentleman who strongly speaks out against grooming children of any form. The kids at school today are literally prompted by these drag queens to dress up in high heels in front of the audience and practice catwalking with bags of lollies and framed photos of the drag queen as a prize for the best performance. If this doesn't strike as grooming to anyone with a sound mind, then I don't know what will. This is grooming on a mass scale, yet we are expected to say nothing about it and just let it happen. There are young female students at schools who are uncomfortable with boys entering the girls' bathroom, and rightly so, but they are trapped by the guilt and gaslighting tactics that this whole ideology brings with it. These young girls are afraid to report to the teachers in charge at risk of getting into trouble for being transphobic. This type of gaslighting is subliminally teaching our kids that personal boundaries don't matter, and that if they feel uncomfortable or see red flags, to just dismiss their own natural instinct, all for the sake of inclusivity. What future do our new generations have if they are being pressured and cornered into all of this and being told or made to feel like they cannot speak out? This is about the detrimental impact that overexposure and sexualization has on our youth, who deserve to grow up naturally without pressure or coercion, without being lured into an environment and a dangerous, distorted perception of reality, which is being imposed upon them rapidly and robbing them of their innocence. We must put a stop to this before any further damage is done to our future generations. So let us join together, united, to defend our kids and their right to be innocent. Thank you.
Good evening, Erin, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what inspired you to write a children's book addressing the subject of identity? I mean, especially in the context of Western society.
Well, so I was in a school that I volunteered in since 2015. And during COVID, my line was no masks because my son had bacterial lung infections when he was a child. And I knew that easy research showed that masks can heighten that. So I pulled both my children and I set up a homeschool in my house with other children for 2 years. I was still on the school board, but we all met by Zoom. And when we came back, I couldn't believe it. This was a school that didn't have any flags in it. Kids were not allowed to wear graphic t-shirts or sports teams because they cause divisiveness. And I came back and there was 8 rainbow flags in the hallway. And I'm like, this is odd. Where we don't do flags at all because it causes divisiveness. And I walk in and there's a fight going on with parents and the administration. So much so that they had to put up 3 meetings where over 100 parents showed up to all 3 of these meetings in this private school. Lo and behold, I go into the kindergarten room and I find these books and I couldn't believe what they said. This one book has a picture of a doctor holding a baby, and I'm paraphrasing, but the page said something along the lines of, when I was born, the doctor said I was a boy, but doctors are adults and they make mistakes too. And I looked at it and I'm like, who published this? So I realized that I can publish a book and I can publish something that's speaking truth. And so I wrote what is now a book as something to say to administration. And it's all the ways that children identify in their social groups. I identify as kind and as smart and as brave and as generous and as stylish and musical, all the ways that children would identify another child. And I decided, let's see if I can get this in print, and I did. And yes, I have to have a little bit of a thick skin because it's literally called I Identify, and both sides aren't okay with that. But at the end of the day, we need to be on purpose parents using this term specifically for the ways that the children identify as their character, their strengths, and their talents before this term is used later on in their life in the school, and where they can look at it, be like, I don't identify that way. That doesn't make sense. So we need to use this term with our children earlier on because the left is using it.
So this is almost a tool of preparation, knowing that what the children are going to be facing when they're at their schools.
Absolutely. Now it is. It wasn't intending to be, but now that we look at what children need and what in their development, they need to be strong with their morals and values and simple with their morals and values. This is a way to really focus on their strengths, which is another thing that we need to do.
So how do you think it is that the current education system is in Western societies influencing a child's understanding of their identity?
Well, they're out in here in Canada, there's an organization called SOGI, and they're calling themselves SOGI 123, and SOGI stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Ideology, or Identity. And they are not a curriculum yet, but they are very, very much influencing teachers, principals. They're going to these schools or having PD days, professional development days, where they're teaching how to be inclusive and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate language in the classroom, pronouns and all this stuff. And that's where we are starting to see parents really standing up in Canada, especially in BC and Alberta, because this is the only place where SOGI is at the moment. But it is everywhere. And it's not appropriate at all to have a drag queen in the school, or people talking about a trans man talking about how they had a mastectomy to grade 4 and grade 6 students, which has happened. There is a line and they've crossed it, and parents are starting to fight back.
And it's a beautiful thing to see. It really is. So can you share some insights on how your personal background has influenced your perspective as far as on the themes that you've covered in your book?
Well, I went to school to be a teacher, and 2 weeks on my placement, I threw up my hands and I quit. It was the first time when I realized that children couldn't get zeros, or they weren't allowed to fail a grade. They had to keep on going through. Red ink was too traumatizing. We had to use green or purple ink because of the children not being traumatized by red ink. And on the lunchtime recess, 2 9-year-old boys were fighting. So the teacher that I was shadowing grabbed them, and they were trying to get to each other. One had a bloody nose, and they were still trying to get to each other. And she brought them to the principal's office, and she was reprimanded for leaving finger bruises under their arms, trying to keep them away from each other. At that moment, I realized I will be fired. I will not walk on eggshells. I care too much about children to not discipline them the way that they need to be disciplined. I'm not talking about bruises. I mean, detention. No, you get a 0. We need to work on actually doing this work. So I actually went to sleep. I had a dream that I was going to be a welder. I packed up in 2 weeks. I moved all the way across the country to Alberta and became a welder. But I was a Sunday school teacher for 10 years. I was a youth leader for a decade. And since 2015, I've been in the schools telling my stories to grade 1 to grade 9. And during COVID, I taught 4 children, grades 4 to 8. So I don't have maybe an official background, but I've been around children for a long time, and I'm very studious as to biology and chemistry and brain development and even the effects that screens have had on them and all that stuff. So I've been very diligent in researching and looking into what they need and how you need to speak to children. And that's where the book idea came from, is just that we need to be on purpose and intentional with our children.
So what kind of impact is it that you actually wish to make on the children's lives who read I Identify?
Well, I really want them to know that they identify, I want them to recognize what their strengths and their character in the book. And I want them to recognize their friends and other students in their class by their strengths, their character, and their talents. I think that, you know, there's a lot to be said for raising children to always look at the good in people, opposed to their people's faults. And so with this first book, yes, that's exactly what I want them to see. I want them to be like, oh, Joey is the musical kid. He sings all the time, right? And Jane, oh my goodness, she's so stylish. I want them to see those good parts.
So what role do you think parents, teachers, and communities have, like, in helping children navigate their identities when it comes to, you know, living in this scary and oftentimes confusing world?
Well, parents are the first form, and they have to be intentional. I think that what we're living through right now started in the 80s. That is my personal opinion, because that's when both parents typically went to work and trusted the school system to raise their children, to give them the education, to have the extracurriculars, and their social standings and their beings. And over time, the education system with the universities and the way that they're teaching teachers to teach, and this inclusivity dialect is coming in. And now we're getting teachers that are fighting even parents, or maybe not, because parents aren't actually talking to their children about their identity. They're not talking about things at home. And we need, as parents, to be talking about everything at home, because if you don't talk to them, somebody else will.
I think that's a brilliant, I don't like to rubbish schools, and I don't like to rubbish people or individuals in general, but a lot of the things that we've come across as far as teaching materials, educational books, the people that were disseminating those, I wouldn't have them babysitting my child for more than 5 minutes. Yet we'll hand our children over for 6 or 8 hours, you know, at a time, and we expect our kids to come back normal. I think what you just said is quite important. The biggest thing that we've got to do here is we need to talk to the children more. We need to ask them, what did you learn today at school? What did your teachers talk about? It's not good enough to just go, oh, look, you know, drop your bag on the floor or put your bag on the hook and go and play. Dinner will be ready in, you know, an hour or whatever, and then just ignore the rest of the, you know, the child's day. Unfortunately, because we've done that for as long as what we have, this is why all of these, for want of a better word, pornographic books have been allowed to sneak into our schools.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing too, is when we're not talking to our kids, we are not engaged. There's so many parents that don't go to parent-teacher interviews. There's so many parents that don't book that time to know. And a lot of these schools, my son was in a school for 4 months. They didn't allow a parent in the classroom, in the school. And I'm like, whoa, this is my kid. They're like, no, this is policy. And I said, absolutely not. Now my children are at a school where I could be in the classroom I'm in every single math class, because I have to relearn how to do math apparently. But in saying that, finding a school where you're allowed in is very important. And I feel like parents are busy. They're not intentional. Not all parents, but they don't even realize what they need to be talking to their kids about. They don't realize that they should be in these classrooms to see what's going on, and they need to know their teachers, because a lot of them, like, they know maybe the one main teacher, but they don't know all the other teachers. So when you say you wouldn't have somebody one of these teachers babysit your child, that's probably correct, but they have no idea who this person maybe even is. So it's really important to be intentional, to know who is teaching your kids and who they're looking up to.
So do you plan on writing any more books focusing on similar themes like that impact children's well-being and development? And if so, can you give us a little bit of a sneak preview, or what does the future hold? Are you going to be writing more books?
Absolutely. So the next one should be out by Christmas, and it's called The Sparrow and the Raccoon. And I have a series. These are the stories that I intended to publish. I Identify came out of necessity, and it was almost a practice to learn how to publish a book. But my series is all stories. However, you know the story, The Boy Who Called Wolf?
Yeah, The Boy Who
Right.
Cried Wolf. It's an old
Yeah,
classic.
you know it. You know exactly what the lesson is. That's what these stories are. So the first one is The Sparrow and the Raccoon, and it's a story about reputation, misconception, and the power of your words. And it's and rumors. So it's basically, you know, teaching children about their power of their words and rumors and how you can wreck somebody's reputation. And it's
bringing
also
back morality. That's a
and
very
bringing back
powerful
morale.
thing.
Yeah, the second book that's going to be coming following that is going to be about innocence and how to trust your parents to hold knowledge until you're bigger and stronger. And the third one, the lesson is your entitlement robbed you of blessings you deserved. And so those are the first 3 and about 10 that I have ready to go.
That's
So
incredible.
I'm really excited about them. They're stories that I've made up from my own, where I grew up out in the bush up in Northern Ontario. And yeah, it's definitely something that is going to teach parents how to teach kids, and lessons that they can reference with just the title of the book.
Now, I know you're a teacher, and a natural thing, or you trained to be a teacher and decided not to be. So the natural thing most people would think would have been, yeah, let's go and write a book. You sort of brushed past it really quickly before. You stitched metal together. How does
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
go from being a teacher to deciding to become a welder?
I think it was a divine dream, because I had that dream. I didn't even know what welding was. I moved across the country in 2 weeks, and I started as a heavy equipment operator and made money to go to school. And then I became a welder, met my husband on the job, and that was it. So I love to work with my hands. There's nothing I can't do. And yeah, it was a really interesting and fun time of my life. And I've got to do a lot of fun things from it, like help people with their classical cars and that kind of stuff. So it's definitely a hobby now, but it's something fun that I can do into my retirement.
That's incredible. I'm absolutely blown away. I really am. Lastly, before we leave, based on your experience as an author and educator, what advice would you give to others who aim to create meaningful content for children?
Do it. Don't just think about it. We need more people writing truth and good, wholesome books about the world and about what's going on at a level that children and parents can teach at. There's so many different things going on, and for the amount of books that are out there right now that are negative, or even, I dare say, evil or pornographic, it's astounding how many there are. So we need more content that is fighting that specifically.
But where can people find you? Where can people follow you if they want to buy your books?
Well, it's on Amazon, but I'm not exactly how it is in your country, how easily accessible. And there's also on my website, it's www.identifybook.com. You can order from there too, although the shipping may be expensive. So maybe we can have a talk and figure out a way that I can get some books to Australia way cheaper than a conventional method.
Oh, we'd love to help with that, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Erin McCormick.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My name is Courtney Colson, a female to male to female detransitioner, and I lived as a man for 5 years, and it took me less than a year to transition. So from the moment I had this idea that I wanted to be a man to actually getting on testosterone, it was less than a year. And aside from my mother, no one questioned me. And, well, if my health practitioners did actually ask, they ignored all these very obvious red flags that I clearly just wanted to opt out of being a woman to make myself feel safer, to be treated as a man, opting out of sexism, basically. And at first, taking testosterone made me feel great until it made me really sick. I had just a little cold, but that was enough to turn my immune system completely upside down, and I've never been right ever again. I don't know if I will be able to fix what's wrong with me, because I can no longer eat anything other than meat and dairy. I am very intolerant to all foods, and my menstrual cycle is a mess. I'm slowly figuring out what works for me, but when I decided to detransition and I told my doctors this, they just dropped me. They didn't want anything to do with me, probably because they're afraid of a lawsuit, which the lawsuit's coming, don't you worry. And there's no roadmap. There was no information for me or what to expect or what to do. I just, I'd go to the women's health clinic, get all the tests on my female genitals. Thankfully, I still have all of those. And, they say everything's clear, fertility should be fine. My menstrual cycle has been a nightmare. But I've been taking phytoestrogen, soy-based estrogen cream. Seems to be helping. But no doctor told me this. I had to figure all this out for myself. And the other changes, I will say, at least I enjoy those, that I have the deeper voice, I have more muscles. So for me, I think my issue was I didn't want to be so small and girly. So becoming more butch helped me a lot, but I didn't really have to go down this medical pathway. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of gays, because a lot of gay people are gender non-conforming, a lot of gay men are effeminate, and gay women are butch, are masculine. So this cult, this trans cult, really preys on people like us because we already have those gender confusions or vulnerabilities, and so it's exploiting that. It's exploiting this. It's not just gay people or kids. I think any heterosexual kid also goes through this anxiety and confusion, not knowing their bodies and not fitting in, and we are now medicalizing perfectly normal stages of human development. Oh yes. And my endocrinologist, Dr. Nicole Opie of the Keogh Institute, if you want to know, she did a hard sell. She really wanted me on that testosterone, and I've been told by an insider that she pushes for hormone replacement therapy for a lot of things, hormone treatments, for transgender people, for postmenopausal women, for obesity, for everything. She just she is out there at a lot of these conferences talking about this. And so, well, I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure that I wanted to be trans. But I thought, okay, I'll see these therapists. I can't really afford to keep going to see the therapists. So I'm going to go and see the endocrinologist, and maybe she can tell me if I really want to do this, and she'll tell me all the pros and cons. No, she just told me all the supposed pros. Oh yeah, all the changes you'll want, you'll be 100% male, you'll pass. There'll be no side effects, nothing. She really did not explain what I was getting myself involved with. And the only thing that saved me really was COVID. I've never had COVID myself, but when the pandemic hit and there was the lockdowns, I did not want to go and get top surgery. I was considering getting top surgery, and then COVID, the lockdowns hit, and then I realized, yeah, I kind of don't want to be in a hospital right now, so that gave me enough time to think about it. And then I stopped taking testosterone as well because it was making me so incredibly ill. I've lost years of my life. I had chronic fatigue just because I was poisoning myself. But the most startling symptom when I detransitioned, and I've never heard of anyone else in the literature, in forums, nowhere. When I detransitioned, so I was taking a very low dose of testosterone cream, and I was taking birth control to stop my periods because the testosterone was so low that it wasn't stopping my periods. So when I detransitioned and I stopped cold turkey and stopped taking both medications at the same time. Don't do that, because I have now experienced about 3 or 4 false pregnancies. So a false pregnancy is where my body thinks it's pregnant because the hormones, the estrogen and the progesterone, they're supposed to be in a certain ratio, and then around the period they're supposed to, descend at a certain rate. But my estrogen go way down. So I feel tired, I feel sick, I feel awful, and my body thinks it's pregnant because relative to the estrogen, the progesterone is too high, which would be in the pregnancy zone. So breast growth, lactation, hugely bloated, menstrual cycle is just a mess, morning sickness, emotional, hormonal kind of feeling. I wasn't sleeping very well either. Just, you feel absolutely awful. It is just the worst thing, and no support, no understanding. So I've had to. The first time was terrifying, but every time after that was just, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. So my doctors were wrong. You cannot, in fact, stop at any time. There are lasting effects to taking hormones, wrong sex hormones, turns out. Oh, yes. So, in terms of my mental health, I basically went insane. I was so severely dissociated. I thought I was a robot. I didn't think I was human anymore. And no one stopped me. I even had therapists. There was one therapist, she doesn't believe in conversion therapy. She wants to encourage my android identity. It's ridiculous. And when it comes to the surgeries, so the chest, first of all, there's a lot of things that can go wrong there. A lot of trans men lose their nipples. They lose all sensitivity there. And then the genital surgery, I mean, that should be illegal. It is experimentation. It's you basically got a sausage roll between your legs. It's just they take your skin from your forearm or from your thigh, and then they stretch your urethra through this sausage roll, and that's what they call a penis. And they have a little pump. You have a little pump in the fake ball sack. You have a little pump that can make it erect. You have no sensation there. It sort of looks like a penis. You can sort of have sex with it, but it's a joke. It's absolutely a joke. And when they remove a man's penis to turn it into a vagina, that's a gaping hole. That is a wound that wants to heal, that wants to do anything in its power to heal. Why? How? How is this allowed? That's harming a patient. I'm just reading the notes here, making sure there's anything else. Yeah, I think. So having detransitioned and come back to my senses and figured out all my other problems, I think there is no such thing as transgender. This is entirely made up. You can't change your body. Body is reality. And what we really should be doing is addressing people's underlying psychological issues. Whether they're gay, whether they're an auto-androphile, auto-gynophile, auto-heterosexual, if you will. It's either you're gay or you're a fetishist, basically, or both. And it could also be a history of trauma. It could be even polycystic ovarian syndrome can cause feelings of dysphoria. Why is that not discussed? Why aren't patients given a full range of the information they need to make this decision? If this decision even needs to be made at all. I really don't think anyone's trans. I really think it comes from underlying unrelated issues, and we've just decided gender is the easy fix, and I really don't know why. And if I could go back, what would I tell? What can you tell someone who's in that state of mind? I don't know. I think I would just ask myself to think more deeply about this. Think about what the real motivation is, and what I actually expect the outcome to be. Because I was deluded into thinking it was possible to change sex, to really look like the opposite sex, that I would suddenly look like a man. So, I don't know, education. Education's probably the only thing. Is if I had been told truly what the outcome was going to be, if I can go back in time and say, look, I took testosterone, I didn't grow taller, I didn't grow a beard, I didn't grow a penis, none of those things. Yeah, maybe that would have helped.
Senators just before on this topic. So my son is now 24 with 7 disabilities, but the main one was autism. So he was extremely vulnerable. And what I'm noticing, what I'm hearing in Congress in America, and what I'm hearing in families here in Australia, and what just Courtney briefed herself on also with her autism, what's being missed is in schools, they are the easily targeted, most vulnerable, what's going on in schools with teachers and with the guidance officers and with the psychologists and psychiatrists that can easily manipulate and indoctrinate. And I feel, as much as I'm so grateful I'm here, this has been missed around the whole world. They are the most vulnerable and easily targeted. Like my son is an only child, he's a legacy child. He lost his dad when he was 16 months old being a soldier. So he was more vulnerable, and I just said I briefed the senators also before, in the last 3 years of his school, he kept coming home going, Mum, I want to be homeschooled. But he couldn't tell me what was going on. And I just think, that's what, I think this is really important, children with disabilities, especially speech language, autism, the Asperger's, they are going to be the most easily targeted for transgender. And at one stage, my son was confused about his sexuality. That's over now. But how easily that could have gone down that route. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll make some very brief comments about what you just said. I don't deny at all that children that have learning difficulties, etc., are more susceptible to some of the indoctrination that we see coming through schools today. That's obviously, you've experienced that, so you know all about that. But I think how we fix things like this is we fix it by having more accountability, right? So having parents take more of an interest in what their kids are learning at school. Having you go to your parents, student, teacher interview nights and things like that, grilling your teachers, finding out what your kids are actually learning, meeting the people that are teaching your kids day to day, sitting down with the principal, so taking real accountability of what your kids are learning. Some of the things that you're saying about the indoctrination and things like that, they do, as Senator Roberts mentioned before, they do come from on high. And these are the things that we obviously need to tackle as well. But on a practical day-to-day thing that we can do right now is we can go to the school, we can sit down with the principal, we can ask to meet the teachers, and we can make sure that they understand our views and our, what we care about as to what our kids are being taught. So I think it's very important for you all as parents to be very active in that process. And I think Senator Roberts will have a bit more to add to that, but that's what we can do right now today. Senator Roberts?
Yeah, but the other thing too, I drilled them every single day, and things weren't adding up with the principal and the guidance officer and the teachers as well.
Absolutely, and when things like that happen, you need to kick it up. You need to kick it up the chain, and you need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they get sick of you, and until you have your voice heard. All the way up to your local parliamentarian, the person that's supposed to represent you in your suburb. Go to them, be nice, be polite, knock on a door and say, "Excuse me, Mr. or Mrs. This is my concern, and I'd like you as my elected member to do something about it." So I think a lot of what happens in the communities as people, we're so busy working, living our life, paying our bills, the mortgage is due, whatever, and we tend to not you, I'm just saying in general, we tend not to take an interest in the political process because it's so far removed from us. We only take an interest when it's going to affect us directly, and I get that, I understand that. But the time for that is finished, the time for action is now. So I would say go see your local parliamentarian and make sure they know exactly what your thoughts are. Maybe you don't get a meeting straight away. Maybe you knock on the door and they're not there. That's okay. Be nice and say, "Hey, look, with the receptionist, can I get a meeting eventually? Or can I get a phone call back?" And speak to them. Because I think a lot of the issues that we're facing now are not tackled head on just because they're not getting that pressure from the public, not the pressure that they should be getting anyway. And they can get away with, in my opinion, blue murder, because no one's knocking on that front door and saying, "Speak to me, I demand to be heard." So that's really important. I can't comment on specifics on your particular case because I'm not 100% across your case, but I would say that that's a good start for all of us in general terms.
Yeah, but also what was happening is I know that local member was good friends with the principal. So it's...
Yeah, I do.
This is where the coalition's going to come in to be important, because when one person goes in there, they get told, "Look, you're the bigot, you're the one who's got a problem, you're the only one who's come in here and complained about it." And that's been a common theme that's come along with most of the emails that we were sent from parents.
Yeah.
I got told, "Go home, buck it up, because you're the only one with a problem." What this has done now is this has proved that it's not only one person who's got a problem with this, everybody has got a problem with this. Had they gone and done what they should have done in the first place, which was maybe run a poll or two or something like that, even just get out in the community and go, "Do you think it's a good thing for us to bring drag queens as entertainment into our schools?" They know damn well the answer would have been a resounding no from everybody. So that's why they went the road of deceit when they did this, because it was the only way that they were going to get this in. And they figured that enough people are going to sit there and go, "Well, it's on the TV, it's on every series, on every show that you see now. It's the normal. Let's just, be tolerant and considerate of everybody." No, the time for tolerance is gone. We gave too much and now they've taken a mile, and they're not going to give it back unless we take it back. But the coalition, if we can get enough parents to just dedicate to going to the P&C meetings, all we've got to do is share that information back to a central hub, and then we can say, "Listen, this school has gone backwards and they're going woke as hell. We need to do something about it." Then we'll do exactly what we did to the Caloundra State High School, and we'll run their name through the mud until it doesn't need to be run through the mud anymore. And it's not like we're just picking on one specific, like I said, Maroochydore High School's done it, they're next on the list. And they're going to hear it just as bad as what Caloundra State High School did, if not worse.
But I think what happened is because it was Stephen College, it was so unique. So there was only St James, as you know, in Brisbane, and you've got Stephen College, and then you've got the Glenveagh Speech and Language School. So parents are so vulnerable, they're thinking they're so grateful, at least their child's in that school. So
I think you put your child into a safer environment and a better environment. So because there's other schools that are worse, well, I'll just deal with what comes from this school. And well, the fact is, had we not stood up and had we not put that report out and had we not pushed the school and then backed ourselves up and said, "Listen, if you don't listen, it's going to get worse. We'll take over your meetings. If you don't listen, we'll keep reporting on it." All they had to do was try and come to some sort of common ground where they listened to us, heard what we had to say. They probably would have got one text article and that would have been it for it. We could have just moved on and the school might have actually gone forward from there to do something decent. It took for us to do this.
But do you understand what I'm trying to say? There's only 3 schools in Queensland.
No, I understand that. So that means there's only 3 schools in Queensland to get back into line, to get into order. There's states that have got 30 schools that are going to be way more difficult to deal with. The fact is we've got 3 schools here that really need, and we're going to give those schools that attention. The rest of the country will see what has happened in these 3 schools, and they're not going to want the same treatment for their school. They're just not. So that's how we, like I said, we can go and we can have the biggest mouths, and the senators can spend all of their time up in the Senate talking about this. If the parents are in those meetings actively saying, hey, weren't you watching the talks from the Senate? Weren't you listening to what happened to those other schools? How dare you? Then they're going to keep on doing it. If they know that every single meeting is going to get larger and larger and larger, people are going to take their neighbours, they're going to take other parents that are going... If you've got one child in that school and that child is in their last year, they're going to appease you and they're going to go, yeah, I'll stop doing that until you're gone. We need people, multi-generational, people that have got kids that are in the schools now, that have got kids that are about to come into the schools, to join up to that coalition and hold their feet to the fire, because that's the only way this stops.
Well, I did. I made it that unbearable that by the end of that senior year, that following year, he had to be transferred to another school. And then I'm like, and then that's other schools, it's their problem again. So it's just...
Yeah, no, it certainly is.
Yeah, do you want me to respond? Is it Sandra?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. First, I'm just going to go somewhere else, because we've just seen wonderful interaction between two concerned parents, two concerned citizens. So I want to go and compliment the organisers of this event tonight. So there's a huge lesson there. The mouthpiece media won't cover this unless it's sensational. The new independent private people's media will cover it. So we need to switch our attention from the mouthpiece media, the Big Brother media, which owned by the same people who are pushing these horrendous drugs on people, and we need to switch to podcasters, to independent media. That's what did it, getting out into the media. So thank you so much to everyone who did that. Thank you so much to the organisers of this event. Secondly, you've been a demonstration of a mother or a father taking the circumstance, the situation in hand themselves. Nothing will beat a parent. Nothing. Because when the parent takes action, the child goes, I'm loved. That's what the child feels. They don't feel strange in any way. So the principal will feel the heat. What you were saying, Wayne, is absolutely correct. Principals think they can get away with, many principals, think they can get away with just about anything because they're not held accountable by the state. Julia Gillard, for all her faults, I remember said, now this was a Labor Prime Minister, she said, the people that control education are the teachers' union. Imagine a Labor Prime Minister saying that. That was honest, and that is correct. And what you've got in state parliament, and to some extent federal parliament, is ministers afraid of upsetting the teachers' union because the teachers' union brings them this to the Labor Party and brings votes automatically to the Labor Party. So you're not going to get accountability through the state system other than where it belongs, which is at the school. The parents holding them accountable. Changing the P&C from talking about how to raise money for the staff to get a new coffee machine to the issues you were talking about, Wayne. So that's the second thing. Just reinforcing what you say. The third thing I would say is, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Sandra, but you mentioned that you felt guilt. Who as a parent feels guilt? Is there anyone who doesn't? No. So I think it's very important to acknowledge that these are challenging issues and that we can feel guilt. But if we're driven by guilt and fear, we're not powerful. So you can't say guilt, go away. You can't suppress it because it's always there. So we've somehow got to acknowledge it. And we've got to talk to other parents and talk to our children. And what Courtney showed was that the inherent bravery of humans. Look, one of the things that has drawn my attention, I first started waking up when I was exposed to the climate scam. And I started waking up to that. Then I went down the rabbit burrow and found out that the UN was driving it, who's driving the UN, etc., 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 all right? But we can still do things. We can still speak about what we find. So it's important to share it. But there are so many parents who've got your issue that would get enormous value out of you sharing that and sharing with each other your insights, feelings. We tend not to at the moment because our communities are fractured. Who works in Brisbane lives up here? Anybody? Who works locally? No, everyone's shy. Okay. But the point is, we're not united communities at the moment, close-knitted communities. We're fractured communities. So we've got to make community. The two fundamental structures for communities are family and community. And we've got to build those communities. We've got to put a lot of effort into it. I mean, I would organise, when my kids were at school, I'd organise with the dads and say, when would it suit you to go for a bushwalk with the kids at 10 years old? You can never find a date. So we'd just say, okay, we're going this day, those of you can come. But we've got to start the rebuilding community. And don't... What I realised, there are several huge issues in our society and Western civilization. The biggest by far is not climate, not the money scam, fiat money, not COVID, none of them. The biggest by far is the anti-human agenda. The anti-human agenda. They're indoctrinating children from this high, saying humans are greedy, rapacious, uncaring, unkind, just don't care. And what are they saying? These mongrels are saying, trust us, give us power in government. What the hell is government? A group of humans. They're saying, surrender your power and give it to the government. Well, I'm saying we need to take that back. And we need to take it back very calmly, very confidently, and you do that by the PNC meeting, you do that by talking to the principal, and you do that by confronting your MP, you do that by talking to other members of the community, other members of the school community, you do it by talking to other parents, because you are strong. What they've done during COVID was teach us that we are weak, but by golly, together we are enormously strong. Oh, and I want to acknowledge Neril. I forgot to acknowledge Neril, and there are other people in the room, I'm sure, but Neril has also done a lot of work in the community, Safe Sunshine Coast Safe Communities. Neril's done a lot of work researching and sharing that information. So that's being part of the citizenry, just like Abby has done and is doing.
Is Andrew Wallace a good guy like you guys, or is he a naughty guy like me?
Jasmine, isn't it? Jasmine. I don't know Andrew Wallace. I've never had interactions with him. I may have met him, but I see a few ladies here were vigorously shaking their head, so I'll take it off that. The other thing, Jasmine, I would say is that one of the least useful words in the world, you're young to understand this at the moment, is the word good and the word bad. When it's raining, to a farmer, that's good. To someone running a tourist resort, that's bad. Okay, so good and bad mean nothing. Can you tell me more about what your question is with Andrew Wallace?
Well,
is he helping the community? Is he representing the community? Are they the things you want to understand?
Well, when I went to Canberra for a school trip, a fellow classmate asked him, is this good? And he responded with, he said he encouraged stuff and encouraged the jab and all that. And I'm just not sure, so I wanted to ask that question.
He encouraged the COVID jab? Well, he's highly irresponsible. So that's what I mean. That's what I mean about specific behaviours. Good and bad are meaningless terms. I know you're young, but I want to compliment you first of all for asking a question. That's what citizenship means, requires. It requires standing up and asking questions, especially when you don't know, and you didn't. So thank you, I applaud your courage. But someone recommending the jab, the COVID jab, it's never been tested. It is highly unsafe. It is toxic, and it is admittedly ineffective. That is bad advice. That is inhuman advice, I'd say, and to recommend people getting the COVID injection. So his behaviour in recommending the jab is deplorable.
Well, it's not like a question, but it's a statement. When it was 2020 something, it was my birthday, and COVID, the pandemic thing happened, and it ruined my birthday. And my mum was pretty angry, right, Mum? And we saw on YouTube or something that a lot of weddings and a lot of plans are got cancelled too, and I guess Mum just got led into good stuff. I'm proud of you, Mum.
It actually, during the COVID period, there were a lot of first birthdays that didn't happen.
A statement was made in relation to contacting the local MP. The local MP for Caloundra is Jason Hunt, and he's a Labor MP, and he endorsed the drag queens. He had his photos taken with them at the school. And so I had friends who actually went and interviewed the headmaster at the school because they were so disgusted with what happened. And they were told by the headmaster that while they may not have agreed with it, they had no choice because it's in the Queensland curriculum as part of the subject, and they had to present it. So Jason is busy calling elder people like myself, offering the 500 electricity rebates and all the rest of the things to win votes. But on the other side of it, he's encouraging drag queens. So people need to be very aware of that because we have an election in 12 months. We need candidates.
I'd like to say that the fact that he's come out and he's endorsed all this kind of stuff, that's actually probably better for you. Because now, if you're willing and able to do it, if you can spread that message in your community, it can be as simple as calling the local radio station every day until they put you on. It can be that. It can be printing flyers and handing them out in your local community. It can be, going to his office and saying, I know what you've done, I'm going to get you next time, and then campaigning for his competitor at the next election, helping them to win. It can be, standing at the polling booth, handing out the competing future parliamentarians how to vote cards. So there's a lot that you can actually do to, make sure that he's not there next time, and I'm sure you're going to do it. But that could very well be the nail in his political coffin, and don't ever let him forget it. Every chance you get, make sure that he remembers what he did.
And he's on a marginal seat.
Even better.
And you just tell 40 voters about that, and he just lost 40 votes.
40 votes right now, Dave. There you go. Instantly.
Entrenched now.
That's it. You're wonderful.
I don't get it. Why do they want to sexualise children? Like, it's clearly bad. Is it just to break down the family structure? Is that it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
and also to destroy moral values.
Yeah.
Right across society.
Yeah.
So I'll make a quick comment about the sexualisation of kids. So the sexualisation of kids, it's ultimately about bringing down the very fabric of what holds a society together. Bringing down our traditional values, the bedrock of our society, our traditional Judeo-Christian values, completely destroying all of that.
Yeah.
When I say they, I mean the globalists, the predatory billionaires, as Malcolm likes to call them, those kind of people.
Parasitic
predatory global billionaires, globalists. If they can destroy the very fabric of society and they can bring us down, have us fighting with each other, remove the glue that holds us together, which is obviously the next generation, but the children, it gives them ever-increasing levels of control over society over time.
And is this what they do with all these events that happened recently? You get all these, there's COVID, there's The Voice, there's, the war now in Iraq. It's like you're suddenly against your friends at every single corner. Yeah. Like you were together on that one, but now you're against. Like,
absolutely.
It just seems like every week there's something new.
Yeah, there is control out of chaos. So the more fractured a society, the more broken it is, the more apart everyone is. Senator Roberts mentioned before about building community and things like that. If they can destroy that kind of glue, it really helps them gain more control. And that's what they want. They just want more control, more power over society at the end of the day. They want what all other rich men and women want. That's power. Yeah. Because when you get to a certain level, money doesn't mean anything now. What's money? We print the money. What's money? We own the banks. What's money? We own the corporations. It means nothing. Yeah. It's about power and control.
Yeah, control.
And the other thing, what's your name?
Annie.
Annie, great questions. The other thing they're about is about putting faith in government.
Yeah.
Turning to government.
Get rid of God, become government.
Correct. The communists and Maurice Strong is the guy who fabricated global climate change. Okay? It's a complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. He admitted, he got to a very senior level in the United Nations. He was effectively pulling the strings in the United Nations. Okay? And he said that he had two aims. One was to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. It's real. The other one was to deindustrialize Western civilization. Deindustrialize it, send us back to the caves. The man was a lunatic, but highly intelligent, very, very capable networker, extremely effective in his communication. They want to destroy national government. They wanted to get us to turn to government, socialist government globally. They want to destroy family. They're communists. They want to destroy property rights. John Howard in this country stole property rights. His government stole property rights. Some people know, very few people do. That was put in place to comply with the United Nations Kyoto Protocol based on climate change. 10 years later, 6 years after he got booted from office, John Howard admitted that on the topic of climate science, he was agnostic. He never had the science to do it. John Howard had my admiration until I learned what he did. Now he's one of the worst prime ministers I can imagine in this country. He did so much damage. But the thing is, people still think he was a conservative. He was pushing the globalist agenda, I think because of political expediency, not because he's a globalist. Right. But he did it out of ignorance and gutlessness, in my opinion. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that don't trust anyone in government, and I mean that sincerely.
Because they're just puppets for a...
Correct.
Yeah.
Sometimes for their ego, sometimes for the globalist predators, sometimes they just don't know what their ego just says, get re-elected, get re-elected, get re-elected.
Yeah, yeah.
And they'll compromise their principles. So trust yourself, scrutinise politicians, put them to the sword and ask them questions and look at what they say, because the people of this country are the only ones who can change the constitution, and they're the only ones who can put the government in place. Yeah. So we are the top of the country. As a people, we are the top of the country. We haven't been fulfilling our responsibilities of holding principals accountable, MPs accountable, governments accountable, so the country's where it is.
Yeah. And just one more question. With the schools, I've chosen to homeschool my kids next year, but I just wondered, I think one of the challenges parents face now, especially in high school, is that you've got technology, and I feel like you have your kids, and they have all their friend groups, and they all have the same idea, like with gender transitioning and stuff. And if you don't agree with that, you get told you're a bigot. And so I feel like these kids, these kids are getting told by the teachers they're bigots and that they're not cool with their friends. And then because they come home to their families, and I'm just imagining my kids coming home. We're quite, I guess, conservative or whatever. How are parents going to navigate that? You know what I'm saying? Like they're not going to be cool. They're not going to be cool group. I feel like when I was in school, there was like. Sort of like it was cool to be emo or whatever. Bit innocent, because we didn't really quite have the internet then. But now it's like you've got much more dangerous things, and if you're not in that, I feel like they're setting kids up against the parents. Basically, I'm trying to say, like how are parents going to navigate that?
You've already at the first step. You're at the first step because you recognise this is going to happen. That's the first thing. That's really important. The second thing I would say, there are many things you can do, but labels are the refuge of the ignorant, the incompetent, the dishonest, and the fearful, and a whole bunch of others. So when someone uses a label on me, a conspiracy theorist, climate denier, whatever, or even if they call me short, which is true, right, in a derogatory term, then what happens is that I turn around and say, thank you, I've just won the argument because I've given you some facts and a logical argument, and you've come back with a label, which means you haven't got the data, you haven't got the argument, so I win.
Yeah.
So just hold them accountable like that. The other thing is, you're not on your own. You've got your family, you've got your extended family, and you've got homeschooling associations now that are just crying out to help, and they want you to pass on things and to draw sustenance from them. School of the Air has been going for many, many years. Every now and then, the remote parents get together so that they can meet each other, because they help each other with telephone, radio, etc. So you're not alone. Yeah. One of the things in COVID was they wanted us to think we were alone, isolated, vulnerable. And then the fear comes in, and when fear comes in, Annie, even the brightest people start losing rationality. Fear overcomes that logic. So acknowledge the fear, don't suppress it, but talk through it, and then you'll suddenly realise, hang on, this is rubbish.
Yeah. So what it comes down to is they're grooming our kids. Yep. It's embedded into the system into the education curriculum. What can you guys do about it?
Well, I've been calling it out now for several years. What Courtney was talking about, gender dysphoria, calling that out exactly as she said. It's inappropriate, it's inhuman, cutting bits and pieces off children when all they need is some love and some attention and some care as they go through a normal part of transitioning from being a child to an adult through adolescence. It's a very difficult period. So it can be quite normal for people to question their bodily functions, question their genitals, etc., and what they're all about. So recognise that. So I've been calling that out. What are some of the others? I've been calling out, look, the number one thing that they're trying to destroy is children. So they're distorting the curriculum. They're teaching them bullshit, basically, pardon the French, but they're teaching them child sexuality. They're grooming children, child mutilation. They're grooming children in some cases for paedophilia. So we need to recognise that it's going on. I've been calling it out for years. I've been calling out what's happening with what do they call them? Picture books. They're like comics, but they're books. Graphic novels. I've spoken about these kinds of things. So, and we've asked questions. We've asked questions in Senate estimates about that. But the real push, the real power comes from when parents jack up about it.
Yeah, I mean, what we can do, because obviously we're not the government, we're crossbench senators in the upper house, so there's only so much that we can do. But I think, for me, my main role is to raise awareness, which is why in my speech before I said I'll go anywhere. Obviously, I'm a Victorian senator. I'm not a Queensland senator, but obviously I was elected to represent us, to represent the country in federal parliament. So I kind of feel like it's my duty to go wherever I can to talk about these important issues. So my role is awareness at the moment, making sure that people understand what's happening, giving as many speeches as I can, and getting people motivated and interested to take responsibility. Because at the end of the day, Senator Roberts and I cannot just wave a magic wand tomorrow and it's all conservative and it's all back to traditional family values and all that. We can't do that straight away. It's going to take people like you to be, to support us in what we do in federal parliament. And like I was saying before to this lady here, it can be as simple as next election comes around, put your hand up to, do 3 or 4 days at the polling booth and hand out how to vote cards. Either mine or his, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just a smaller minor party or someone who is conservative, etc. Support that person. Go to forums like this and make your voice heard. But most importantly, I think talk to people that are in your spheres of influence. So you don't need to stand on the street corner on a soapbox and yell out to random strangers if you're not comfortable. If you're comfortable, go ahead and do it. But if you're not, speak to your family and friends and say, hey, look, did you know that X, Y, Z was happening? Whatever X, Y, Z is that you're concerned about. But the important thing, I guess, is not just to yell at it, but to get them to question things. So if you've got a family member that's, doesn't care about these issues, isn't on board or whatever it is, just drop small things. Oh, did you know that the local member went to a drag queen show at a school the other day? What do you mean? Oh, you didn't know that they have drag queen shows in the local government school? This is what happened. And you explain it to them, let them marinate on it, and then drop little hints and then talk to them. But people in your circles of influence, your family and friends that you can influence those people to conservative, traditional ways of thinking and help them to see the light, so to speak.
What's your name?
Bridge Walker. Hi.
Bridge.
Bridge.
The other thing you can do is support the minor parties, because Pauline and I and Ralph are sometimes the only three that are voting for a sensible bill or a sensible motion, right? We love Absolutely. Ralph's support. We work together well. But the 3 votes, I can't remember the motion. I think it might have been to discover the COVID contracts from Pfizer. Get them, you paid for these things, yep. And they won't release the contracts. Yeah. You paid for them. So the first time I put that motion to the vote, there were 3 of us, and that was it. And then the next time Alex Antic put it up, it was early this year, February, we missed out by 2 votes. Because the Liberals plucked up some courage. And then just recently, I moved a motion saying let's task one of the committees with an inquiry to come up with the terms of reference for a COVID Royal Commission. Okay? We won. And that's highly significant for two reasons, Bridge, because first of all, that's the thin end of the wedge to getting the Royal Commission that Albanese promised. The second is, it didn't even go to a division on votes. It went through on the voices, because the Labor Party and the Greens and Pocock actually supported it, so I've got to pull my finger in there. So the Greens and Labor Party actually were afraid to vote no and call for a division, so it went through on the voices, which tells me there's a hell of a swing on in the Parliament that people are now starting to realise there really is an issue going on here. But that didn't happen in 5 seconds. The third thing you can... So we're building up momentum. My office defeated the cash ban bill that Labor and Liberal passed through the lower house under Morrison. We defeated it by going to the grassroots of the Liberal Party and Labor Party. They put so much heat on their members of Parliament that they weren't game to pass it through the Senate, and I moved a motion that succeeded and said get it off the Senate book. So the cash ban bill. But they'll be back in many, many different forms. But the other thing you can happen is that while we can build up steam just working together on small and growing that vote in the Senate, if we had few more minor party senators in Parliament, we'd have the balance of power. It means we wouldn't govern, means we wouldn't be able to run the joint, but we can stop the hideously ugly stuff that's going to hurt the country. So when you have balance of power, you can say to the government, you want to vote on that, water this down. You want to vote on that, drop this, right?
This is, sorry to interrupt, this is clearly an ethical issue. I just cannot fathom how it is not a legal issue. And this, in terms of, how is this not a crime? Grooming, how is it not a crime?
You've got to...
How is this embedded in our system?
Well, look at it this way, Bridge. In Victoria, Ralph states, sorry Ralph, but he's been speaking against this. Dan Andrews passed a law through Parliament in Victoria saying that if you're a parent and you don't affirm your child wanting to change gender, you can go to jail, correct?
Yep, correct.
So the next question I'm going to put over to Hugh, as a barrister in our office. He's worked as an advocate on tribunals, an advocate for people who haven't got the power. But maybe he can tell you why this is not a legal thing at the moment. Are you happy to do that?
It is a crime. The problem is there's nobody there to press it. You won't find a police officer who will actually go and do it, because they're all under starters orders. Oh gee, it's happening in a school.
Can a civilian do it as a civilian arrest?
No, can't. So it's
What's their recourse?
The recourse is to make it get your voice very, very loud and actually start calling it out for exactly what it is. We have anti-grooming laws in relation to, teachers who are caught out grooming their students and end up having sexual relationships with kids who are underage. That can happen with males and female teachers as well. And we've got convictions in relation to those. But if you have a headmaster or headmistress of a school cooperating in relation to this, bringing drag queens in to actually do God knows what they do in front of the kids. I was reading some commentaries in relation to it where one of the kids said that they could see the penis of the drag queen through their stockings. That being reported by a child to their parent, that's just gross. But that's happening with the tick of these woke teachers. And at the moment, in the teaching profession in Queensland, it's been absolutely infiltrated by wokeness. And wokeness, for me, is essentially really a push to change people's perceptions so that they start thinking what is abnormal becomes normal.
So just to reiterate, what you're saying is we need to get a police officer to charge.
Well, yes, well, good luck with that. And
It needs to be a courageous one.
A very courageous one, but you actually need to present them with all the information that's got. They'll turn around and say, but it's in the curriculum. Well, BS. I bet your bottom dollar that it doesn't say anything about drag queens in the curriculum. I don't think drag queens even come into the LGB blah blah blah
No, they don't fit
acronym.
Not in the alphabet.
It seems to me, and it's been said here in the room, you know, it is nothing short of overt grooming, and I know exactly where that's going.
The other thing, Bridge, is that we can be surprised by our power, and I'm talking about as citizens, not as a senator. Where's Shelley? Hope she doesn't mind me calling her out.
Right there.
Ah, right there, right in front of me. Shelley's mother of Dan McDonald. Now, Dan McDonald is a fiery. He was outraged about the mandates they put on firemen, everyone providing a service, right? He stood up and he organised the Australian Firefighters Alliance with other fireys. They had, right from the word go, he conducts himself with extreme integrity. And I mean, he's not over the top, he's just got high integrity, conducts himself very, very well. He has a wonderful bearing, very respectful manner, but you can tell there's determination there. And he was telling me when we first met, because we were supporting each other, that he has an offensive strategy and a defensive strategy, all right? So there's a lesson to this story. The offensive strategy was to proactively take on the government. The government wasn't ready for that. The defensive strategy was what will happen if one of us gets prosecuted, right? The fireys in Queensland, I think, were the only ones who were not mandated. The government said, we're not going there. Now, he's paying the price for it now because they're chasing him. But the point is that by standing up with other fireys, Dan protected all of the fireys from ever being mandated. I think that's the only firefighters in Australia and the only service profession in Queensland. So that's what one person can do, but he of course the way he operates is marvellous. He's almost like a goes-to walks, you know. It's just so soft but it's strong. And he got other people, so bring other people into the fold. You might be a teacher who'll suddenly say, I've had enough of this grooming of kids, and a teacher will do something, and he or she may surprise you what they can do. But with your support, they can do even more. So you don't know where this spark's going to come from.